can start the panel. Yes, so Amit wanted to say a quick word. Yes, Amit, you can say.
Sure. No, I just wanted to just to very quickly thank the Simons Institute on behalf of JLS, on behalf of Rachel and Ayush and me. Just that the lattice semester program, which was sadly interrupted by the pandemic, was actually where some of the ideas behind our work were sort of initially pondered. So just want to thank you for that.
Thanks, Amit.
Yes, and while we are going to have official panelists, I would not mind at all if people make this again, like the talks can be interactive. People can unmute themselves, ask questions, and as I mentioned before, if you're an attendee and you cannot and you want to be able to unmute yourself and ask questions, just raise your Zoom hands and we'll promote you to panelist. And so again, I guess I'll not as usual. I'm not going to do introductions, and maybe Chris is the only one that hasn't spoken before. So we're very happy to have our lattice expert, Chris Peikert, and Yael and Benny as the official panelists. But again, I hope other people would weigh in as well. And I think this is an area that is worth talking about in crypto. This is computational assumptions, maybe the one part of where we are really different than other fields of computer science, theoretical computer science and mathematics. This is maybe the more subjective part of our field, and I don't think we have no one has exactly rules. What is a standard assumption? What is a non-standard assumption? What is a valid assumption? What is a heuristic? What is and I hope we can talk about it. But let me start with this question that Amit asked in the break, and that sounds to me like a good question to ask our panelists. So suppose you had to bet your life, or I don't know, bet something very important to you on the security and of course we do use sometimes computational assumptions to protect very sensitive things, so it's not completely hypothetical. But suppose you had to bet your bet something very important to you on the security, or so which of the assumptions you would be most shocked if they were false, say of the 4 assumptions used in JLS, or you can also talk about some close cousins of them if you like. And maybe you can start with Chris because he hasn't talked yet.
Sure. So I guess there's 2 questions that we could consider. Amit's version was gun to your head. Which of these assumptions do you bet your life on? And I think I can give an answer to that. I mean, I think my answer is probably the same as Benny's and yours, Amit, which is, the PRG and NC0. But we could flip it around and say, what's that?
What is that based on?
So I think it's I don't think I have anything that's particularly original to say about this, and Benny probably would say it better. But it seems like the least structured of all of these, a purely combinatorial kind of statement. Of course, we don't really know that it's implied by any of the others or implies any of the others, so we can't formally compare any of these things. But just the combinatorial aspects to it, no geometry, no nothing really. So
it also has the 5-year-old test. It passes the 5-year-old test, right? That a 5-year-old could construct a PRG in NC0 that would be hard for the most brilliant mathematician to break.
Maybe.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me that because Chris, you have bet your academic life on LWE.
You took my question away. So you said we want to make this slightly less morbid. You ask, what are you going to bet your career on? The answer is clear. But the third version of this question is, gun to your head, a gunman knows which of these assumptions are false. Okay, so one of these four is false, gun to your head. What is it? Right, now, this is a trickier question, I think, than the first one. There's a gun to my head, so I have to say something, but I might be saying SXDH, even though it's relatively older than all of the rest of them. That's what I would be, and let's like slightly less morbid, if we're going to attack something and try to say like, I don't believe the implications of these four assumptions, one of them must be false, then which one should I try to chip away at? Maybe SXDH is the one to focus one's effort on. We could say more about it. I'm sure everyone else has thoughts about that too. But how much can we say that it actually has been investigated by cryptanalysts, let's say? It's been around a long time for sure. From my opinion, any problem that I haven't actually studied is actually easy, and just people haven't figured out how to break it. Like, I thought lattices were easy, and then I started looking at them, and that's like how I got into it. So, I don't have anything intelligent to say about SXDH other than, oh, of course it's, breakable, just people haven't thought hard enough about it. But yeah, I would be interested in other people's opinions on this third question as well.
You should try to find clicks.
Yeah, and Alex points out, right, it's already broken with quantum computers, so how much farther we really need to go to break it.
Also, in some sense, SXDH is the most structured, right? This is like elliptic curves. Elliptic curves are laden with structure. And so that's another reason to be. But on the other hand, it has been the one that is, I think, by far the most cryptanalyzed of all the assumptions, of all four. Because SXDH, because it's used in practice so widely, or these bilinear maps are used in practice, I think there's just been an incredible amount of mathematical cryptanalysis.
So, Yael, maybe the two questions of the two questions of Chris, or maybe three, but let's say two. Which assumptions? We don't have to involve guns, but which assumption are you the ones that you are most certain that is secure, and which assumptions you're the most suspicious of?
Yeah, so for me, I see your point with less structure means probably more security. I understand the sentiment. But for me, I think a big part is how much wiggle room does the assumption give me. For example, if you ask me if Goldrach's one-way function is secure, is not the same as asking, is there a PRG in NC0? Or even asking SXDH, are you asking me, is SXDH secure in group, I don't know, 2, whatever the numbers are, or does there exist a bilinear group for which SXDH is secure, is a different type of assumption. So I'm kind of a little more comfortable with the wiggle room that I feel like, okay, maybe, this is false, but I can try to move to a different assumption. So in that sense, I agree that I feel also, if I had to choose one assumption to rely on, I would choose PRG because, if Goldach is broken, I'll find something else. There's a lot of options out there. With regard to SXDH, I'm not sure I share the sentiment that it's the easy, that would be my choice for the easiest, because I feel like, exactly like I said, no groups, there doesn't exist any group for which I know we don't have that many candidates, but who knows? Maybe 5 years from now we'll have an amazing multilinear map candidates. So I mean, mathematics is an evolving field, and so yeah. So I'm not sure. I think the specific assumptions, these worry me a little bit more because why? Because I mean, I trust that we're all very smart here, but come on, we're all muggles, and it's but however, going back, the fact that things are broken with quantum computers is a big down, a downer. So I'm kind of contradicting myself. So maybe I'm not happy with SXDH. I'm not happy with the fact that it's broken with quantum computers. I am happy with the wiggle room. So, but I would choose definitely PRG as my go-to.
interestingly, I think Shaw's algorithm maybe even if you forget about the very real things that people are building quantum computers, Shaw's algorithm also showed maybe that these things don't have as much wiggle room as you think, because it broke all of them in one shot. So it's so at least presumably it's possible that a classical algorithm will just break all of them in one shot.
That's a very good point. Yes.
Benny.
Yeah, I also agree with everything that was said. Let me add one point. I think that let me try to to give an external answer, right? I mean, not regardless of my own private point of view. Given an assumption X, I think that it's more reliable if people who understand this domain of X really try to break it, because there's no chance that I will be able to break bilinear groups, because I don't know enough about the mathematical structure of bilinear maps. And I'm not sure, like I looked before this talk, I plan to prepare a few slides about this SXDH. And I couldn't find, I found many papers who used it, of course, but I couldn't find a lot of cryptanalysis. And I wonder, like, maybe this is a question. I'm not making a statement because of my ignorance, right? But I wonder how many mathematicians, like real mathematicians, look at this problem. And on the other hand, if you go to Goldreich, for example, I think that this kind of question about CSPs, basically, this is, we are the kind, as a community, right? We are the kind of people who are supposed to solve it, right? If it's solvable. And indeed, with this, the whole thing with the degree 2 over the rails, right? The whole thing, it was broken, right? I mean, you guys found the attacks because you work on these kind of things, and this is the right community to study this problem. So my confidence here is mainly based on the fact that when we talk, not personally myself, but as a community, when we talk about local PRGs, in a sense, we specifically understand them better than we understand other things.
I mean, that actually reminds me, I think maybe Shafi remembers, is that Moni who said something like that factoring is a better assumption than AES, because if factoring will be broken, it will be broken by someone we know, like Coppersmith or something like that. And if AES will be broken, it will be broken by, who knows, by someone we don't know.
It'll be broken by Google DeepMind or something like that, right? I mean, it'll be, the attack will be completely opaque to us, maybe even.
In the sense that we won't know that they attacked it, or that we won't understand the attack?
We won't understand even what the attack does. I mean, this is to me, an entirely plausible possibility. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it'll happen, but right? I mean, it solved Go, this game that was completely inaccessible to computers, and it's beating the best human with a couple days of training on what the rules of Go are, and then all of a sudden it's defeating world champions forever. Like, we should set DeepMind against AES and see what happens.
Let it first solve LPM without noise.
Sure.
So Benny, I just wanted
to first understand application, no? Even that's
So
just one really quick thing about SXDH, just so that we are all on the same page. I don't know if you can hear me.
Sorry, my connection, maybe I'm not going to be the best moderator because my connection is not super great, but maybe if I have a little bit of internet, I'll try to use it to ask the next question. So
Amit wanted to say something about SXDH. I'd love to hear it.
Yes, please do.
Just we were actually talking earlier, Rachel and some of us, that in fact, it's not like we really need SXGH specifically. So if you're worried about that, we can also use, for example, something called bilateral Kalin, and they're like a whole family of bilinear assumptions. So all the cryptanalysis that you did see on bilinear maps, like most of those kinds of things are relevant, and we can play with which assumptions specifically we're working with there. So it just that's all I wanted to say.
So maybe next question is the following. I kind of remember a panel in the celebration for Shafi and Silvio. I think there was also a discussion of computational assumptions. and it's been, I'm trying to remember exactly the sentiment, but I remember there was some people that were kind of concerned about how many assumptions are, how the field has changed from the days where you had to apologize for DDH to the days that every paper introduces at least one new assumption, and preferably with 5 different heuristic on top of it. And some people thought even maybe we should have like some kind of a moratorium on introducing new assumptions or things like that. So I wonder what do people think about it? Should we have some discipline? Should we? Are there any rules? How do we evaluate? How do we explain when we sit on program committees? How do we explain to non-cryptographers what is kosher and what is not? And I don't know, maybe this time we do the inverse order, Benny, Yael, and then Chris.
I can say two things. So first of all, I kind of personally, I changed my mind about this subject. Like, I think that I was very conservative in the past, and now I think that I think that we should balance between these two things. Like, Avi gave a talk in TCC 2 weeks ago, or I don't remember exactly. And he said, I don't remember the exact citation, but he said that we show when someone told us, this is impossible, let's do it. Right? That was the spirit in the early days of crypto. And I think that this spirit is super important. And part of this spirit is, to have the guts to make assumptions, right? And sometimes to make sub-exponential assumptions and there's, super polynomial things that seems like maybe sins, but they really advance us. On the other hand, I think that we should be skeptics and we should try to understand the assumptions. And in this aspect, I wouldn't limit the number of assumptions, but I would be happy to see more papers, not about applications. I mean, applications are great, but also about like basic assumptions, like try to relate A to B, or I don't know, try to understand it. What are the known heuristics? What are the known attacks? What are the bottlenecks? And I think that we need more of these kind of things. Just to compare, in complexity, right? I mean, doing de-randomization based on search assumptions, right? I mean, this is kind of a huge amount of effort. You don't just assume a PRG, right? And also in crypto, right? I mean, we wouldn't have like Hill or extractors if people would say, okay, pseudo-randomness is there and that's it. We don't want to base it on one-way functions. So I think that also from this effort of reducing to simpler assumptions, we also gain a lot of insights and a lot of tools. So we should basically push these two extremes, the understanding the assumptions and generating new ones. I think that both are crucial.
Me. I completely agree with you, Benny, 100%. I want to also say one thing which Amit talked about, which is, is about reductions. It's about an algorithm that reduces one problem to another. And if the reduction is interesting and there's good ideas there, then it's meaningful. And that's, I think, how the field moves. And I think I agree with Benny that I think also in the past, there was a point of time where just every paper had a new assumption. And I think we were all kind of, oh my, stop this is crazy. But actually looking 5 years kind of ahead, it was pretty good. Look where we are now, and it's because we dared. So I think the point is we should understand that sometimes the way we move is by generating a mess and cleaning it up. And if we're worried about generating the mess, maybe we won't move forward. So I think that's, and we learned it even, I'm just looking back, even, let me give another example, which is very different and not messy. We changed like even looking back, going back to the example of zero knowledge proofs, they want zero knowledge proofs, they completely changed the model, tons of interaction, blah, blah, blah. Now we're back and we're, going back to the original, no interaction, CRS, but we need to dare to change, to assume, to change, and then slowly we'll get back to where kind of we are intended to originally. So we need to be careful of being too conservative, but on the other hand, I agree, generating too much mess can be, problematic. So you need a good path, kind of.
Yeah, you two of Benny and Yael took everything I wanted to say, which may be a surprise. I don't know. I don't find myself very daring in terms of assumptions that I make, but I do want to echo what Benny said about, and also Yael said about, and lament a little bit that when we do have new assumptions, we don't as often have relations between them as much as we really ought to. And I feel like there's kind of a publishing problem, which is that if people work on attacking an assumption for a while and don't get anywhere, this kind of work apparently seems to get kind of lost, right? And may never ever get see the light of day, and people may never know of it, may never know, and they may have been, the work that was put in may have been just, one step away from yielding something really interesting, either constructive or destructive. I don't know what the solution is to that. Right? When people do good cryptanalytic work, of course it gets published because there actually is something to show for it. And when people do attempt constructive work, also and it doesn't work out for whatever reason, often there's no publication coming out of it. I'm probably a hypocrite on this myself, right? Every time I've tried dozens of things and they don't work out, and who has time to write it up? Who has time to talk about it and make it formal? We have informal networks and things like that where we tell people, oh, I tried this, I tried that. But in terms of efforts that don't pan out, I really wish we had a better way of broadening the distribution of that. And then I just wanted to add one more thought about making bold assumptions and things like that. Actually, when we say LWE, that's a very overloaded term, and I think that we are making pretty bold assumptions about LWE with great benefits a lot of the time. So when we say LWE with a sub-exponential modulus to noise ratio, it's actually a pretty bold assumption. Many of the reductions, like search to decision, they break down unless you're willing to pay the sub-exponential time, as Benny mentioned in his talk. I don't know that we're all that super confident that, let's say, 2 to the root n approximation for shortest vector is all that hard. I mean, we know we can do it in 2 to the root n time. There could be a part of the spectrum here that we don't really understand all that well. And, people have certainly looked at it. LLL was content with exponential factor approximations. But I think that in that huge spectrum, we're being pretty bold, and we've done well with it. But I'd like people to think more about the whole spectrum of from the actual assumption we're making to the problems that it's related to and where the gaps are there. That would be nice to see more of.
Maybe to your point of publishing work that tries to talk about failed approaches, I think maybe there's 2 communities that we can learn from to some extent. One is a cryptoanalytic community. They actually often, if they cannot break a block cipher, they look at a reduced version of it, and that's very agreed, etc. So they modify the assumption and they break the modified assumption, and that's. Another thing is they sometimes have like very weak attacks, but they show something is, I remember, I think I saw a talk once by Adi Shamir, where he showed you could break AES with a 256 block length in 2 to the power, I don't know, 2 to the 40 or something like that. It was like, you instead of 2 to the power 256, you do it 2 to the power 240. But it's still interesting because you show that you shave something. And the other communities, of course, a complexity where, if you cannot break something, you try to prove barrier results that these techniques will not do it. And it's not that we don't do that in cryptography, but maybe we should do more in the sense that if you try something and fail, try to abstract what is this that you tried and publish that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also, I think we probably don't have enough papers of the form, algorithm from class X is, provably not able to defeat this. Maybe it's much harder to do in our field, or maybe it's just not traditionally done. I don't know. What do other people think about that?
So I have one thought about this, which is, we make up all our assumptions, but who tries to really cryptanalyze these assumptions that we make? It's not us. Very few of us. Chris, maybe you, but most of us, like most of us, 90% of the time, if not more, we just want to construct this, construct that, a better this, a better that, and new primitives, and it's very exciting. Whereas taking someone's assumption and trying to break it, it's a little less exciting. If it's your own, you definitely don't want to break it. And if it's someone else, okay, so you work so hard, and it somehow, I feel like it doesn't get the splash, that kind of, or the joy. But this may be my only personal, for me, that's how I feel. I know we're different, and some people may completely feel the opposite. But I think that's a problem, because for me, it's so much more fun to make assumptions and build, as opposed to be a downer. But maybe it's a personality. I'm optimistic kind of by nature.
I want to add something here, which is that I think we should all remember that, like, this is not a glory-driven field. When we make assumptions, when we do something cool with an assumption, we're painting a big target, right, on something. And that's the way we should always approach all constructive aspects of our field, that we are painting bigger and bigger targets on certain problems. And I hope that now they're 4 very big targets. They're already big targets, or LWE and Bitcoin, and now they're like very big targets on the other things. And that's how we should look at it, right? And by the way, I highly recommend breaking your own assumptions. Like we've done it, Ayush's, Boaz has helped. Like, these are targets for us to attack. We shouldn't think about it in terms of, this is my assumption, I don't want it to get broken. No, we should break it ourselves.
But even standalone, there are pretty interesting questions, just like mathematical. It's like a simple polynomial. Can you find roots? Like, it's just that curiosity is enough.
Just to relate to the points that were mentioned, I think that as a first step, I totally agree, and I think that as a community we should encourage this kind of research, as I said before. But as a first step, we should try harder to make the assumptions more precise. And I think that Chris may correct me, but in many LWE papers that you read, I think people don't even bother to state what is exactly the exact variant of LWE which is being used. I'm not talking about the abstract, right? I would expect to see it in the abstract, but even in the introduction or even during the paper, and this is kind of, I think that it's okay that you don't want to, I don't know, it's okay that some of us will work on breaking assumptions and others will work on generating new schemes. That's perfectly fine. But I think that we should all try to be very precise in these kind of things. And by the way, this is what allows someone like Adi Shamir to state that he can shave something, because the original assumption was very, very accurate, or at least it was understood as a very accurate statement. If you don't have accurate statement, you cannot even show like a partial progress, because there is nothing to relate to. So I think that this is something that as a community we should learn, both from complexity theorists and from cryptoanalysts.
Maybe that's a good question. Let me I'll ask it, and then maybe Yael can continue. I'm wondering, if you state a new assumption, I guess there are 2 kind of schools of thought. One would be try to state the minimal assumption that implies the particular primitive, so be conservative. Try to state the minimal assumption that implies the primitive that you are trying to deduce. The other is paint an even bigger target and be as bold as possible and try to spend the cleanest, strongest assumption that you don't know that it's false. And what do you think is better?
You should do both, I think. You should say exactly what you know and what you don't know. And, it suffices to assume this, but as far as we know, maybe even this is how to break, right? I mean, that's what you should do. Or we don't even know how to break this variant.
Can I switch the subject for a second from the assumptions, or is the panel topic assumptions?
We can be flexible. I'll be happy to hear. I'll be happy for you to switch.
So here there's a construction now. There's several constructions, and it's sort of early, yeah, in the sense that just like FHE, original paper of Gentry, seemed to generate a lot of research, but to begin with, people didn't think that this could become a real system. but it is a real system. And these days, actually, you can utilize FHE for real applications, even at scale. So I know that right now we just finally some construction where people are starting to believe that this can be concretized. What are the projections, in your opinion? It's obviously not going to be this construction, but that this could actually be useful in the sense that somebody could actually implement it. And again, some of you were in the DARPA program when FHE was, and it was clear that that's kind of the wrong question to ask and one should do a lot of research. Yet, the fact that there was this DARPA program and the fact that a lot of money was put in order to make it efficient and to make the assumptions sort of more, I think it gave it a huge boost to get where we are today. So that me as a theoretician who's now an age where in Hebrew we'd say hevel havalim akol hevel, I am actually asking you a little bit of a concrete question. What would be your projections?
I think for functional encryption, a reasonable goal is to get it as efficient as FHE. That might take, I don't know, 5 years. I'm optimistic if it can be done, but I don't see that why that cannot be done. For functional encryption to I/O, because of this exponential tree business, I don't have a good understanding of what's the complexity there. But I think getting functional encryption as efficient as state-of-the-art FHE is an ambitious but plausible medium-term goal for the community.
I agree with Rachel on this, on that, but I think also for I/O or obfuscation in general, we'll have to find other recipes that are much more efficient before they can be useful. So, for example, and there is line of work that's going down that road, right? So with Ayush and several other co-authors, Yael and Mark, Sandri, and others. For example, we recently looked at some coding-based constructions for I/O that are much more heuristic, of course, in terms of security, but large factors more efficient than right now. It's still not that efficient, but it's significantly more efficient. So I think that probably very different recipes will come up, but as we understand better, that'll happen. I think that the near-term next step is the same as with FHE, streamlining, right? I think now we finally have a construction based on the assumptions that we're discussing, and we just tried to get it based on everything we have, but streamline it, understand it, and then start to tear away the different parts.
So this 5-year guess is an interesting one. So for example, if I wanted to just use it for public key encryption, to transform secret key systems out there to public key systems, that's another thing that's short of general construction, right? And that you might be interested in doing that efficiently, for quantum-based schemes or something like that.
Right.
I want to say that, I'm actually very optimistic. I know it's my nature, but I am, because we see the history. It's not FHE is not the first. Look at PCPs. I remember when I was a student at MIT, and Eli Ben Sasson was there, and a bunch of others. And I don't remember who told it's never going to be used ever. And it was, everybody agreed. It was like a consensus. Of course, never. Now, they're used. There's companies that make money, and it's used by millions of people.
I don't know if they make money.
They don't make money. Maybe they don't make money, but it's used.
They make money. Maybe the investors are not making money, but they're making money.
They get investors to turn over their money.
So why not here? We just started. It's like we're in diapers. So it's hard for me to put numbers in terms of how many years, but why not? If we work hard, then yes.
Yeah, I don't know if PCPs make money. I think some of them make a little bit of money, but definitely they have improved by something like, I forgot, I saw a talk once, 30 orders of magnitude or something. So they
improve. By the way, they do make money.
they literally make money. They mine money. That's in 10 years, maybe that will be the only form of money.
So you think this is in the stage then that if you're, because I've seen an interesting trajectory, which 30 years ago, systems people were not interested at all in what theoreticians do. Today, it's very, very different. So they're building systems based on ideas from theory, sometimes even claiming proofs, using sort of general proof techniques. So would you say that someone with an eye of 5 years ahead or 4 years ahead from systems should try to understand in general strokes what's going on in the obfuscation world, because it will give them some insight on where to set their targets? I mean, possibly the answer would be wait for 2 years,
I think wait for a few years at least. Is my
Yes.
but I'm also very optimistic, like Yael. I mean, definitely.
Functional encryption is so well motivated potentially in practice that that could be actually, it may well be a good idea in terms of for someone's in systems to try to imagine if they had a magical functional encryption, what would they do with it, and then go and talk to people like Rachel and Amit and Daniel and Tzvika and everyone here and see how maybe a variant, maybe this can happen.
I think we should remember too that just like with FHE, functional encryption for very specific, highly tailored kinds of functions, it's entirely plausible that within 5 or 7, I don't know, some small number of years, that will be a piece of cake. We'll have new recipes, we'll have new paradigms, new constructions, and then people will set on optimizing the hell out of it for the specific application that they're working on, and they'll be doing amazing things that even accounting for this prediction will still be amazing, right? In 5 or 7 years. So yeah, I feel no qualms at all about the optimism that everybody's expecting, despite feeling like I should be a devil's advocate or something. It seems like a very easy bet from my perspective. Historically.
But wait, where's Tzvika? Tzvika, are you online? Or I guess it's too late.
Tzvika is supposed to be the resident.
I know.
How can he be a pessimist?
In wrong before. So one other question. So quantum, right? So there's people have asked questions about quantum PCP, quantum FHE. These things they keep happening. What about quantum obfuscation? I mean, that is obfuscation with respect to quantum adversaries, or obfuscation for quantum computation.
I had some thoughts about this pre-prepared, so can I jump in on this? So one thing that's really interesting, looking at like the JLS work versus the works that have built kind of on the ideas and principles, but then are plausibly post-quantumly secure. One big distinction that has become even more clear in my mind after watching all the talks, the great talks made this very clear to me, which is that the SXDH and bilinear maps are really offering this degree 2 functional encryption from which everything can kind of be built upon that to get higher degree. And that's not the case if you limit yourself to the lattice and combinatorial assumptions that are plausibly post-quantum, which to me seems like a really interesting qualitative distinction. And that was one reason why, when the gun was to my head 40 minutes ago, that I thought that maybe SXDH is where to chip away, because somehow the constructions that are involving it are really getting a lot of juice from the SXDH and bilinear pairings versus what the more recent constructions are doing. One point I wanted to bring up, there's this really interesting paper, well, several interesting papers now with plausibly post-quantum constructions. And one of them is by Daniel Wicks and Ho-Tek Wee, which has this interesting tool called like Oblivious Lwe Sampling. And I'm going to oversimplify it in what I'm about to say, but basically it's this assumption that you have a public algorithm that can sample the B part, the right-hand side of an LWE sample obliviously, kind of without knowing the secret and the error behind it. And I'm not claiming that this is suspect in any way, but one thing I would want people to take a look at on that is, like, the question of oblivious LWE sampling actually comes up in Regev's original work on LWE. And he kind of says, like, if we had a way to do oblivious LWE sampling in other language, that we could actually solve, quantumly, we could solve lattice problems. And so to me, this raises a really interesting question of, does an oblivious LWE sampler, excuse me, does an oblivious LWE sampler, you know, in some sense, perhaps related to what Daniel and Hotek looked at, not exactly, but does that imply a quantum algorithm for lattice problems? And if so, then that would sort of almost negate the conjectured quantum security of that construction.
I want to just mention that actually this oblivious LW sampler is implied by IO. So if oblivious LW sampling is suspect as a notion, not just our construction, then you know, all the other works, I guess, are also suspect. Any construction of IO will be suspect.
Yeah. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting.
The formalization, the exact formalization of the oblivious LW sampler is extremely important here. And so, you know, the details matter a lot, but it's something that I think is really interesting to look into, because it could imply some kind of, you know, really interesting quantum implications, or not, but, you know, certainly worth a close look.
So if you could just, and again, on one hand, you're saying that for the right definition of oblivious LWE sampler, if it exists, then you could quantumly break LWE, yes?
Yes.
So what does that mean then?
But again, as Daniel pointed out, given IO, we actually do have oblivious samplers, according to really strong definitions of oblivious sampling. So
yeah, so the question would be something like, does IO imply you know, the quantum easiness of lattice problems, or something of this nature? Right. That would be an amazing kind of result. I don't think it's going to be that clean and simple of a statement in the end, if anything holds, but, you know, something of that nature seems really interesting to investigate.
You're the perfect person to investigate it too,
I mean,
Chris.
Send me an email if you have ideas or want to think about it further.
So Boaz just wrote a question, and he says, in Regev's sampler, I think it's important you're able to forget the coins you used. No.
Right. Yeah. So this gets to the details, which I don't feel qualified to, like, pontificate on, you know, in this venue. But the point of Regev's in Regev's reduction, he non-obliviously samples what is essentially an LWE instance, and then uses quantum to forget the coins, right? And then if you can do that, then you can actually use the resulting quantum state to solve lattice problems with a much more machinery. So the question is whether an oblivious LWE sampler can sufficiently play the role of something that creates without, you know, knowing the coins or having, you know, forgotten the coins.
So Chris, is this in the original Regev paper? I'll be very curious to take a look. I think there might be very important differences. I think maybe one thing that I can easily imagine being a big distinction is, in our case, the oblivious LW sampler, is that you're given the public matrix A and you're generating LW samples with new secrets S. And I think in the Regev case, I would imagine it's the opposite, that you're generating fresh samples with the same secret S, right?
No, not so much. So the A roughly corresponds to the lattice, and you want to generate a point that's close to the lattice without actually knowing the solution to it. So it's, you know, I'm not saying there's any result here that's easy, but it seems analogous.
Maybe you can get a lose-lose result.
Maybe, yeah.
But I think Shafi had a question.
No. I asked. I just want to clarify. that I understood what Chris was saying. So part of what you're saying is that if there's quantum, possibly IO implies the quantum easiness of LWE. Now, what about the second part, obfuscation for quantum computation?
I'll let someone else talk about that, I think.
So wait, I see Zvika asked a question. Zvika, are you here? Since I see you asked a question?
I think you made a comment that basically I was saying that in
yeah,
uses this is a reduction. It's not an algorithm, and the reduction uses a black box, the bounded decoding solver. And Chris was wondering whether IO would be able to replace it. And there is also a good question whether this oblivious is statistically oblivious or computationally oblivious, but maybe this is not to go into this panel.
No, but Zvika, since your face was here, can you put it back?
Maybe he's in pajamas.
Well, okay, so, but can you hear us without a face? See, no pajama and no nothing. Listen, what do you think about that IO will be, what do you think about the question whether IO will be efficient enough for use at some point in the near future?
I would to see where I think we're going, we can wait until tomorrow. I think, I don't know, it seems like it's going in, maybe it's going in a direction where you could consider implementing, but it's still, there's so many, it seems so indirect, right? You need to go through so many transformations in order to make it work. And I'm sure somewhere somebody is working on sort of stripping it and making it more sort of direct construction. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know. People still implement obfuscation, right? So maybe now people try to implement these new things, and maybe we'll see some good things from that.
Okay, so that's it. I'm Zvika. I was saying if Zvika the pessimist is optimistic here, we're done, you know? So that's it. I feel like we are in a very, very optimistic place right now.
It's 3 o'clock too, so I think we really are done.
It's 1 a.m. here, so you know.
1 a.m. Yes, I feel like
I'm not actually committed to anything that I've said.
So I have a question. This is about like quantum computers in general. Do you think that, I mean, in order to break these assumptions, SXTH and everything, you probably need fully scalable quantum computers, right? Like lots of bits. Is there any hope that we'll have something in 10 years?
Well, the people who build them say, if you give me $1 billion, I'll get you one in 15 years. Now, maybe they're just trying to get $1 billion, but you know, that's roughly how they're budgeting it, as far as I understand. So, you know, 15 years with you know, a 1% probability, that seems pretty significant to me. So
we'll both quantum safe IO for half as much.
Yeah, exactly.
Discount.
Daniel, how much do you charge for secure IO? Yeah,
maybe,
but you need.
Let me thank everyone, so can release the people at 1 a.m. and at 3 p.m. Maybe an open problem for people to think about is how can we make IO more expensive so we can also come up with $1 billion budget.
Just be the PCP overrated, you know.
Try to make something that requires some. Something.
You can always run it fully homomorphically.
There we go. All right, thanks, Boaz.
Thank you so much, Boaz.
Yeah.
That's the next right to the FHE under the over. There's still tomorrow.
Till tomorrow will, for the people worried about quantum, the quantum secure post-quantum future is tomorrow. So so see you all tomorrow. Bye everyone. Thanks to all the speakers.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for a really interesting day.